Hi there, it's Tash, and today I am here to do my October wrap-up. It's not very themed, it's not very spooky, which is, a little bit disappointing, but too late now. I read 6 things this month. These 6 things I read were all read at the start of last month, which was a very long time ago, so I don't know how well my recall will be. We'll see how much I remember. The first thing I read in October, I remember very vividly actually. It was the 3rd of October and I was very busy, but because it was the 3rd of October I had to indulge in some Fullmetal Alchemist because it was the 3rd of October and I didn't forget. It was good. I love Fullmetal Alchemist. 5 stars. It was a good time. And then the second thing I read in October was Poorly Drawn. No? Yep, no. It's very sunny in Australia. We're all surprised at that. So here it is. I might put it down before I, glare you to death. But I read Poorly Drawn Lines, which is a book of a series of comics which also exist on the internet. I read it because my friend lovingly got it for me when she went overseas, so now I have, fondness attached to that book. I gave it 4 stars. It was funny. A lot of them I had seen before, but it was funny, and now everyone knows I have a Tumblr, The third thing I read in October was The Hatred of Poetry. Can I get this in a non-brutal, glary position? Yeah, I'll put this down before, death by glare. So I keep throwing things onto my bed and, inevitably my bed bounces and then the camera bounces and I'm like, why did I do that? Anyways, back to The Hatred of Poetry. I read this because I saw the title and I was like, my god, I hate poetry. This is targeted towards me, the target audience. And it is a non-fiction book about precisely that, about why Ben Lerner thinks people don't like poetry, and he kind of leads on from that to a theoretical, argument, conception of what poetry is, which was kind of interesting. Lerner is one of those people, and admittedly he's not the first person or the only person, to separate poetry from poems. So poems, Lerner doesn't really talk about this. I don't think it interests him too much, but I'm guessing that to Lerner a poem is like a technical description and a specific instance. So something would be categorized as a poem if it met technical and formal criteria, which again is another point of debate. But say you thought that poems need to be lineated to be poems, then a lineated piece of work is a poem, but it is not necessarily poetry. And in fact, Lerner thinks that no poems are poetry, and that poetry is actually an ideal that poems aspire to, but it's unattainable, so they can never reach it. And what constitutes poetry is a meeting of personal and public. It needs to be attached to a work or a piece of communication that is so personal and completely and utterly representative of the person who made it, but it also needs to be universal and understandable by everyone, which that's not going to happen, so therefore nothing can be poetry. And because no poems can reach this ideal, we as audience members to the poems are disappointed and upset and we hate it because it's not poetry, god dang it. At least that's what I think it was saying. I may have misremembered. It's been a long time. If you like poetry, I guess I can recommend this book. I wouldn't read it again, even though it was only about 80 pages. It was a quick read. It's in a very colloquial style. I think I read it in one sitting. So again, if you like poetry, look into it, maybe. I don't know. You do you. And then the next thing I read was Silver Shadows by Rochelle Mead, which is part of, like, the second last book in the Bloodlines series, which is a Vampire Academy spin-off series. I don't want to talk about it. I gave it 3 stars. Let us all move on with our lives. The next thing I read, finally, was The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. I just want to note that I was convinced for over a year, since this has been published, I suppose, since I first heard of it, that the Small Angry Planet was Earth. I was so sure. I was so convinced. And I was like, when are they going to Earth? You know, they would go to Earth and it would be like a thinly veiled social critique of humanity. And no, it's not Earth. Humans do not live on the Small Angry Planet. Aliens do. So if I'm disappointed too, I know. The aliens still are thinly veiled social critiques of elements in people and humanity. I should note that I read this on audiobook. I don't know if I could have sat down and actually read it as a physical object that is a thing, because as literally everyone says, it is very slow, it's very character driven, and I don't know if I could have done that, but I just got to lie on my bed and have someone talk at me. So I gave it 4 stars. It was nice. However, I really did not like the ending. I need to hold this up high, but my arm is sore, so we'll just put that there. I did not like the ending. I don't think, and if you've read the ending, I think you know what I'm talking about. I don't think that this book needed such a serious ending and such like a grave ending. I don't think that this book really needed that gravity to it. I think it worked as something that was just like a smidge lighter. I felt it was tonally inconsistent to me. I was upset. Those 2 people should have got together, and I'm upset, and you know, for that reason I won't be reading on the next book, and also because the next book follows a different set of characters, and you know, I am a bitter man with limited room in my heart. I ain't going on adventures with a new crew. No, I'm out. And the last thing I read was The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. I'm realizing that I read 2 non-fiction books last month, and I should have just saved them for this month, for non-fiction November. God damn it. So I gave this 3 stars. I have a lot of thoughts about this book, and a lot of them aren't even strictly related to this book, but the context surrounding this book and the way in which I perceive this book rather than the book itself, because admittedly the book is just a fun, whimsical book about tidying up and cultivating a space that you love, which is beautiful and lovely. But it starts from the premise that we have a lot of things and that we have trouble throwing things away. And then it just moves forward from there. It doesn't go back, which is where my issue is. And admittedly, this could and probably is because of social and cultural differences, but at least for me, you can't talk about material objects in a serious way, and you can't talk about reducing your material objects in a serious way, and you can't even talk about changing your life in a serious way, to me, without talking about capitalism. You have to talk about what the underlying structures are. You have to talk about why we have so many things and why we feel compelled to keep consuming and why we have so much trouble throwing stuff away. And it didn't tackle that. And I see so many people kind of holding up this book and praising it and saying, this is going to change my life. It is the life-changing magic of tidying up. But I don't think that it is the book that a lot of people need. It certainly wasn't the book that I need. It doesn't... You have to talk about capitalism before you can talk about reducing the number of material objects in your life. Otherwise, you're going to keep associating freedom with consumer freedom. My phone has run out of space, so I'm reading this as divine intervention, and I am shutting up about capitalism. So that's it. That's everything. I hope you had a good reading month. If not, a potentially better reading month this month. Goodbye.